They call you lucky. They say being a Gemini is a blessing. And maybe they're right, but not in the way they think. Because blessings, real blessings, don't come wrapped in ease. They come wrapped in paradox, in questions, in fire. And Gemini, more than anyone, knows what it means to live with two truths at once. You walk into a room and light it up. But what they don't see is how you scan every word, every face, every silence before speaking. They love your voice the way it dances through conversations. But no one asks what it's like to carry a mind that never turns off. People think your power is your charm, your cleverness, your ability to adapt. But they miss the deeper truth. Your true blessing is your ability to hold contradiction and not break. In 2026, the world will try harder than ever to put you in a box, to make you pick a side, to be consistent, to slow down, to stop asking questions that make them uncomfortable. But you weren't born to make others comfortable. You were born to move, to think, to shapeshift, to stir ideas that haven't even been invented yet. And this year, your blessings will no longer be invisible. So today, I'll show you 25 reasons why being a Gemini isn't just a gift, it's a sacred assignment, a mystery encoded in your soul, a force the world can't replicate, only misunderstand. And when we reach the end, you'll see your duality was never your flaw. It was the language the universe used to whisper that you were never meant to be just one thing. Let's begin with the first Gemini blessing, the one that quietly moves entire worlds. Reason 1. Gemini thinks so fast. Even silence becomes a sentence. They say silence is empty. But for a Gemini, silence speaks. While others freeze in quiet moments, a Gemini's mind is already weaving possibilities, alternate endings, better questions. You can sit next to them and think they're zoning out, but they're solving puzzles you didn't know existed. This isn't daydreaming, it's a mental superpower, a processing speed that outruns logic, language, and even time itself. In 2026, this gift will be especially visible because the world is speeding up. Decisions need to be made faster. Complex ideas must be understood instantly. While others struggle to adapt, Gemini will feel strangely at home. You don't need hours to understand people, you read them in seconds. You don't need manuals, your intuition is the manual. You don't follow logic, you rewrite it on the fly. And yet, this blessing often goes unrecognized because the mind of a Gemini doesn't shout, it whispers, it observes. It creates meaning in the spaces no one else looks. Life lesson: if your thoughts feel too much for others, they're probably not thinking enough. Your speed isn't a curse, it's the rhythm of your soul, and it was never meant to slow down for the world. Comment if you've ever felt like your mind finishes conversations before they even begin. Reason 2. The words Gemini uses are never just words. They're portals, and that's the part people miss. They think the blessing of Gemini lies in talkativeness, in quick jokes and charming speech. But the real power, it's not how much you speak, it's how your words unlock doors in people's minds. Gemini doesn't talk to impress, you talk to awaken. A single sentence from you can change someone's whole week. Not because it was loud, not because it was fancy, but because it reached a place in them no one else dared to speak to. Your blessing isn't verbosity, it's verbal alchemy. You take raw experience and shape it into insight. You notice the unsaid. You hear the invisible thread between what someone says and what they're truly feeling. This is why people remember your words even years later. A joke you made in passings, a late-night question that pulled truth out of silence. A message you wrote that felt eerily prophetic. You don't just communicate, you translate the chaos of life into meaning. That's why in 2026, as so many lose themselves in noise, Gemini's voice becomes sacred. Not because you're louder, but because your clarity pierces through. Life lesson. Your words are not decorations. They're medicine, prophecy, and mirror. Never let anyone reduce your gift to just being talkative. You speak in code that only the soul can decode. Comment if someone once told you a sentence you said changed how they saw the world. Reason 3. Curiosity isn't a trait in Gemini. It's a sacred instinct. If the mind of a Gemini is a portal, then curiosity is the compass that leads them through it. Most people ask questions to get answers. Gemini asks because the question itself unlocks energy. It doesn't matter if it's philosophy, science, an obscure artist, or a stranger on the subway if it sparks a new possibility you want in. You've been like this since childhood. Not because you were restless, but because you could feel there was more behind every surface. Every why you asked was a rebellion against the idea that life should be accepted as is. In 2026, this sacred curiosity becomes more than a personality quirk. It becomes your edge, your magnet, your protection. Because while others accept the world at face value, Gemini keeps digging. And in that digging, you discover what no one else thought to look for. You don't just collect facts. You seek the invisible link between seemingly unrelated ideas, and when you connect those dots, something electric happens. You open paths that didn't exist before you imagined them. Life lesson: the more curious you are, the more alive your spirit becomes. Never let the world convince you to numb your wonder. It's the very engine of your genius. Comment if you've ever been called too curious and secretly took it as a compliment. Reason 4. Gemini doesn't adapt to life. Life adapts to Gemini. People love to say Gemini adapts well, but that's too small a word for what's really happening. You don't just fit into change, you bend it, shape it, reprogram it. While others prepare for the future, you're already living 5 steps ahead. You feel when a shift is coming not from fear, but from a subtle inner vibration. A whisper in your chest that says, this version of reality is about to expire, and you listen. You pivot, not because you're confused, but because you refuse to stay in a space where your mind can no longer breathe. This is why Gemini can walk away from jobs, cities, even relationships that no longer nourish their spirit, while others stay frozen. Because you trust your evolution more than you fear the unknown. In 2026, the world may call it impulsive, but later they'll realize you weren't running, you were realigning. You weren't unstable, you were ahead of the curve. Life lesson, what others call instability, Gemini experiences as divine timing. Change isn't a disruption, it's your natural state of motion. Comment if you've ever made a bold move just because you felt it was time, even if no one else understood. Reason 5. Inside a Gemini is a library that no one sees. Here's the paradox. Gemini is known as the communicator, the speaker, the one who shares. But what they don't know is that you never say everything, because inside you is a vault, a private library, a whole universe of thoughts, memories, fragments, and maps that no one else gets to access. You can hold entire stories inside you for years, not because you're secretive, but because not everything deserves to be spoken out loud. There's sacred data that only makes sense in your mind's language. You're not hiding, you're protecting the complexity. That's why sometimes you fall quiet when others talk too much. Not because you have nothing to say, but because their words don't match your frequency. And explaining yourself would flatten your magic. This inner archive is your greatest source of creativity. You draw from it when you write, when you advise others, when you fall in love. In 2026, more people will want access to your wisdom, and you get to choose who earns the right to enter the library. Life lesson, you don't owe the world access to your entire mind. It's okay to keep some brilliance sacred. Comment if you've ever stayed silent, not out of fear, but because the truth was too rich to shrink into words. These first 5 blessings are only the beginning. Because as powerful as Gemini's mind is, it's the emotional spark inside your words that truly moves hearts. Part 2. The romance of words and wit. Run. Reason 6. A Gemini doesn't say, I love you. they show you in codes. If you're waiting for a Gemini to say I love you the way it's written in a greeting card, you'll miss it completely. Because when a Gemini loves you, it doesn't look like what you've been taught. It's not loud, it's not predictable, and it never repeats the same way twice. Instead, it slips through moments. They'll send you an article that made them think of your dream. They'll quote something you said weeks ago and still remember the exact tone. They'll crack a joke in public just to make you laugh when they know you're anxious inside. Gemini speaks love in code, and only those who listen between the lines can read it. In 2026, when love becomes more performative and filtered than ever, Gemini stays different. You don't perform love, you transmit it with subtlety, with sharpness, with unexpected beauty. And that is more real than any scripted affection. Life lesson: not all love needs volume. Some of the most powerful I love yous are whispered between the lines, and Gemini writes those lines fluently. Comment if you've ever loved someone in a way they didn't even notice but meant everything to you. Reason 7. Gemini's humor is their armor and their invitation. People think Gemini is just funny, but they never stop to ask why. Behind every quick-witted comeback, behind the laughter you spark in others, is a mind that's scanning, sensing, disarming. Your humor is more than charm, it's a strategy, a shield, and sometimes a bridge. You can make people laugh without trying, but what's more powerful? You can make someone feel safe enough to laugh at themselves. That's sacred. In 2026, as the world becomes heavier and more serious, Gemini's humor becomes light in the dark. Not escapism, not distraction, but a way to reframe reality so it becomes livable again. Because when Gemini jokes, they're not avoiding the truth, they're bending it just enough to see it more clearly. Life lesson: if you've ever laughed your way through something unbearable, you already understand the medicine into Gemini wit. Comment if humor ever saved you from a truth that was too heavy to hold directly. Reason 8. The Gemini kiss is not a gesture, it's an event. You think you've been kissed until a Gemini kisses you. It's not about technique, not about performance, it's about timing and intention. Gemini kisses like they speak with meaning, with surprise, and with multiplicity. Sometimes it's light and playful, like a secret passed under a table. Sometimes it's intense and calculated, like punctuation at the end of a soul sentence. And sometimes it's just to see how you'll respond. Because for Gemini, a kiss is more than affection. It's an experiment, a dialogue, a map. In 2026, as physical connection gets drowned in predictability, Gemini still knows how to surprise, not with grand gestures, but with presence. The real kiss isn't lips to lips, it's mind to mind. Life lesson: never underestimate the subtlety of physical expression. A moment of connection, when crafted with intention, can say more than 100 declarations. Comment if you've ever felt a kiss that told you something words couldn't. Reason 9. Gemini can fall in love through a conversation alone. You don't need candlelight or music. Give Gemini a mind that dances and they're yours. It's not even about agreeing. In fact, a little disagreement can be delicious as long as it's intelligent. A Gemini's heart is wired to the brain, and when someone challenges your thinking, inspires new ideas, or reflects your own curiosity, you feel something deeper than attraction. You feel resonance. This is the secret behind Gemini's romantic unpredictability. You're not drawn to people, you're drawn to minds. In 2026, when so many chase chemistry through swipes and shallow lines, you'll still crave the ancient intimacy of two minds colliding mid-thought. Life lesson: surface attraction fades. Mental intimacy grows roots, and Gemini knows where those roots lead. Comment if you've ever fallen for someone simply because of the way they thought. Reason 10. Spontaneity isn't Gemini's impulse, it's their devotion. To others, your spontaneity seems chaotic. But the truth, it's a sacred offering. Because when a Gemini changes the plan last minute, when they pull you into a bookstore just because of a title, when they suggest stargazing at 3 a.m., it's not to be difficult, it's to remind you, this moment is alive, let's meet it that way. You refuse to treat life like a script, You know the soul needs detours, not directions. And the people you love most, you want to give them more than routine. You want to give them wonder. In 2026, this trait becomes a remedy. In a year full of plans, deadlines, and controlled narratives, Gemini shows up like a breath of possibility. Life lesson: there's nothing more loving than inviting someone into the present moment. Spontaneity is how Gemini says, let's live, not just survive. Comment if someone ever made your day better with a wild idea that wasn't on the agenda. You've seen how Gemini thinks. You've felt how they love. But the next 5 blessings reveal something deeper. Not what Gemini gives the world, but how they move through it. Part 3. Freedom, change, and the unwritten script. Reason. 11. Gemini isn't chasing freedom. They are freedom. You can't cage wind. You can't tie down rhythm. And you can't define a Gemini in fixed terms because Gemini is the embodiment of motion itself. People misread you. They think you run from commitment. But what you're actually running from is stagnation. You commit deeply, but only when something feels alive. A person, a purpose, an idea that evolves with you. In 2026, as the world becomes more rigid in its thinking, your presence is a reminder. True freedom isn't about being wild. It's about being in alignment with what's changing inside you. And Gemini knows when it's time to turn the page before the page even curls. Life lesson: you were never meant to live someone else's idea of stability. Your freedom isn't a rebellion, it's a sacred loyalty to your own evolution. Comment if you've ever left something perfect on paper because your soul whispered, this isn't it anymore. Reason 12. Gemini moves homes, hearts, and identities without losing themselves. One of your deepest blessings is your ability to shapeshift, not out of confusion, but out of clarity. You've been many things, changed careers, cities, even ways of thinking. And every time you did, people asked, aren't you afraid of losing who you are? But Gemini knows you don't lose yourself when you change. You lose yourself when you refuse to. In 2026, your gift of movement, physical, emotional, mental, becomes even more valuable. Because this is a year where many will cling. You instead will let go. And in doing so, you'll fly further. Life lesson: you're not unstable. You're a living archive of transformation. You don't just survive change, you become it. Comment if every version of you feels like a different chapter, but all part of the same book. Reason 13. Gemini doesn't fear endings, they initiate them. Endings don't scare you. Not because you don't feel, but because you know something most people forget. The end of something false is the beginning of something real. You've left relationships not because you stopped loving, but because the connection stopped evolving. You've left jobs not because you were bored, but because your soul craved a new kind of challenge. Gemini doesn't break things. You release them like a wind that knows when to stop blowing. And yes, sometimes it's misunderstood. You may be called inconsistent, reckless, cold, but that's because they don't see what you're making space for. In 2026, this instinct will protect you because the endings you choose won't be escapes, they'll be initiations. Life lesson: you're not here to cling to what once fit. You're here to honor your seasons and walk when the door whispers done. Comment if you've ever walked away before things fell apart and later realized it was your greatest act of wisdom. Reason 14. Gemini doesn't need a map. They are the compass. Most people want a plan. They want to know the steps, the order, the outcome. But you move from a different place. From instinct, from internal weather, from the way your body tightens when you're in the wrong room. You don't always know where you're going, but you always know where not to stay. And somehow you arrive exactly where you're meant to. In 2026, this inner navigation becomes even sharper. While others seek permission or direction, Gemini will feel their way forward like a tide responding to the moon. No GPS, no guarantees, just the ancient art of knowing. Life lesson: Your direction may look chaotic to outsiders, but chaos is just order that hasn't been named yet. Trust your compass even when the world demands a map. Comment if you've ever felt pulled somewhere for no logical reason, and it turned out to be exactly where you needed to be. Reason 15. Gemini lives a dozen lifetimes before others live one. By the time someone else figures out who they are, Gemini has already lived 5 versions of themselves, each one richer than the last. Not because you're unsure, but because you know you are too expansive to fit into one identity. You don't cling to labels, you try them on like costumes, dance in them, grow out of them, and move on with grace. You're an actor, a thinker, a lover, a builder, sometimes all in one day. And this, more than anything, is your blessing. In 2026, people may try to define you, pin you down, ask, "So what are you really?" And your answer will be simple: I am whatever the moment calls me to be. Life lesson: you weren't born to live one storyline. You're a constellation, shifting shapes, but always shining from the same soul. Comment if you've ever felt like multiple people have lived inside you and all of them were real. You've seen the speed of Gemini's mind. You've tasted the depth of their love. You've glimpsed the beauty of their freedom. But what happens when the world demands simplicity and you are complexity itself? Part 4. The Mirror and the Masks, Reason 16. Gemini doesn't wear a mask, they hold the whole theater. People say you're two-faced. They whisper it like an accusation. But if they knew what it actually takes to be a Gemini, they'd understand you're not wearing masks. You're holding all of them and deciding which one to show out of mercy. You walk into a room and know exactly what each person needs from you: a joke, a challenge, a silence, a spark. You shapeshift not to deceive but to relate, to protect, to adapt, to survive. And beneath every role you play, there's something unchanging watching it all, the real you, taking notes from the balcony. In 2026, when people are obsessed with being authentic, you'll still know authenticity isn't about saying everything. It's about knowing which part of you is most needed and offering it with intent. Life lesson: you are not fragmented. You are layered. And sometimes the truest self is the one that chooses which truth to reveal. Comment if you've ever felt judged for being different with different people, even though every version was real. Reason 17. Gemini can read a lie before it's fully spoken. While others wait for red flags, Gemini sees the flicker before the flame. You don't need someone to finish a sentence. You don't need proof or backstory. You feel the disalignment like a wrong note in a song. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Years of watching people closely, of noticing what's missing, not just what's said. You can look at someone smiling and feel the rage beneath it. You can hear someone's story and detect where they're hiding the real part. It's why people sometimes get uncomfortable around you. They feel exposed without knowing why. In 2026, this gift becomes crucial. In a world of filtered truths and rehearsed personas, Gemini's intuition slices straight to the core. Life lesson: truth isn't always spoken, but it's always felt. And Gemini has never needed words to recognize it. Comment if you've ever just known someone was lying and were right long before the truth came out. Reason 18. Gemini doesn't hide, they withhold until it's safe. There's a difference between being private and being secretive. Gemini is the former, not the latter. You don't reveal your heart to just anyone, not because you're cold, but because you've seen what happens when your depth gets mishandled. You've been the open book that got torn, so now you turn pages slower. You read the reader before you let them read you. And that's not fear, that's discernment. In 2026, you'll be more selective than ever, not in a guarded way, but in a self-honoring way. Because when you do open up, it's not for attention, it's a sacred act of trust. And when someone breaks it, they don't get a second performance. Life lesson: your silence isn't a wall, it's a filter. You're not hard to know, you're just not available to those who haven't earned access. Comment if you've ever been misunderstood as distant when you were actually just protecting something sacred. Reason 19. Gemini reflects back to people who they really are. Here's something few people realize. When someone spends time with you, they don't just get to know you, they start seeing themselves more clearly. Because Gemini listens in a way that rearranges thought. You ask questions no one else dares to ask. You see people not as who they pretend to be, but as who they're becoming. This is why people often fall in love with you without understanding why. Not because you flatter, but because you reflect a version of them they've forgotten. In 2026, when identity becomes more confused than ever, Gemini stands like a mirror, not forcing definition, but showing light they didn't know they carried. Life lesson. Sometimes your gift is not what you say, but what you allow others to see in themselves. Comment if someone ever told you they only felt fully seen when they were around you. Reason 20. Gemini lives between the lines of reality. You were never meant to walk a straight path. Because your mind doesn't operate on roads, it moves through airwaves, impressions, second meanings, half sentences, dreams. You've always sensed things others dismiss, felt the unsaid, seen colors in grayscale moments. And the strange part, you never thought this was unusual until the world told you it was. But in 2026, this ability becomes your sanctuary, because while others get trapped in rigid definitions, Gemini keeps dancing in the margins, writing poetry with what others call confusion. You know what they forget? Life isn't supposed to make sense. It's supposed to move you, and your gift is in letting it move through you. Life lesson: clarity doesn't always arrive in a straight line. Sometimes it's found in the rhythm between contradictions, and Gemini is fluent in that rhythm. Comment if you've ever felt most alive in the space between certainty and chaos. You've learned how Gemini thinks, moves, and reflects. But we're not done, because the final 5 blessings will take you to the heart of it all, the part of Gemini no one else sees, unless they've earned the key. Part 5. The quiet truth of the twin. Reason 21. Gemini is the loudest quiet in the room. Everyone thinks you're the talker, the extrovert, the one who fills space with words. And sometimes you are. But when the real Gemini emerges, when you're thinking, observing, sensing, you become the loudest quiet in the room. Because your silence isn't empty, it's active. It listens harder than most people speak. It watches everything, then decides if it's worth responding. In 2026, people will try to categorize you again, talkative or reserved, social or distant. They'll keep trying to box you in, but they'll miss the truth. Gemini isn't either /or. You are both, at once, in layers, with purpose. Life lesson. Silence isn't absence, it's presence, distilled. And your stillness can say more than 1,000 voices. Comment if people get nervous when you go quiet, but that's when you're listening the hardest. Reason 22. Gemini's intuition doesn't ask for proof. You've always known things you weren't supposed to know, not because someone told you, not because you saw it, but because you felt it instantly. A shift in tone, a misalignment in energy, a pause that held too many implications. Your mind works fast, but your intuition moves even faster. In 2026, as logic and information overload the world, you'll lean more and more into your inner knowing and discover it's been right all along. You don't need to wait for someone to prove they're unsafe. You already know. You don't need to wait to see why you're being pulled to something. You trust the pull. Because for Gemini, intuition isn't mystical, it's practical navigation. Life lesson. The deepest truths don't arrive with evidence, they arrive with certainty. And your ability to sense them is a gift most don't understand until it saves them. Comment if you've ever trusted a feeling and avoided something that would have hurt you. Reason 23. Gemini's realest thoughts are the ones they never say. Here's the twist. You're known for your words, but your most profound thoughts, they never leave your lips. They live in the back corners of your mind, in notes never sent, in sentences you edit out before speaking. And no one knows how much you hold. Not because you're hiding, but because you understand. Just because it's true doesn't mean it needs to be said. Your restraint isn't weakness, it's wisdom. In 2026, you'll feel the weight of everything you could say and choose with discernment what actually needs to be voiced. Because sometimes the unspoken truth protects more than it reveals. Life lesson: power isn't in saying everything. It's in knowing what to hold and why it's better left unsaid. Comment if you've ever swallowed a truth to protect someone and carried it like a quiet kind of love. Reason 24. Gemini doesn't need to be understood to be whole. You've spent years trying to explain yourself, trying to translate a mind that moves in metaphors and meaning. But here's what's changed. You no longer need to be understood because you finally understand yourself. You're not too much, you're not inconsistent, you're multidimensional, and that's the blessing. In 2026, someone might try to decode you again, to shrink you into a definition that fits their comfort. But you'll smile, because what they don't know is you stopped performing clarity for people who couldn't handle complexity. You don't need to be gotten. You only need to be grounded in your truth. Life lesson. The moment you stop chasing understanding, you start radiating it. Your wholeness was never up for debate. Comment if you've reached the point where being misunderstood no longer hurts, it liberates. Reason 25. Gemini's blessing is that they were never meant to be just one thing. This is the ultimate blessing. Not the charm, not the words, not the curiosity or the brilliance, but the fact that you were never designed to be just one thing. You were built with contradictions, programmed to shift, gifted with the sacred tension of both/and, lover and thinker, observer and participant, mirror and fire. In a world that rewards simplicity, you were chosen to carry the complexity of being human, and you do it beautifully. In 2026, your blessing isn't just that you are Gemini. It's that you embrace the twin inside you not as a conflict, but as a divine balance. Life lesson. You were never one note. You are the entire song, the melody, the harmony, the dissonance, and the resolution. Comment if you finally stopped apologizing for being everything everywhere all at once. So now you've seen all 25 reasons why being a Gemini in 2026 is a blessing, but there's still one more thing. Not a reason, not a fact, a final truth, a quiet echo inside every Gemini soul waiting to be remembered. Conclusion. The final truth of Gemini. So, now you've heard it all. 25 reasons, 25 truths, each one a thread in the intricate tapestry that is Gemini. And yet, if you're truly Gemini, you know that none of this fully captures you, because no list ever could. No language can hold what moves at the speed of thought, what feels in two directions at once, what laughs and aches in the same breath. You are the conversation no one finishes, the idea still forming, the moment that refuses to freeze into meaning. And that is your blessing. In a world begging for certainty, you remain unwritten, unfolding, alive. Not to confuse, not to escape, but to remind the world that being human was never about being one thing. It was about becoming. So if they ask you who you are, don't rush to answer. Smile, tilt your head like you're holding a secret, and say, I'm Gemini. The rest is still being written. Final life lesson. You are not meant to be solved, you are meant to be experienced. Final comment prompt. What part of your Gemini nature have you finally made peace with in 2026? If this spoke to your soul, if somewhere in this long, winding mirror of Gemini truths, you saw yourself subscribe, the powers of the Zodiac signs, not just for astrology, but for the parts of you that no one else has ever put into words until now.